I'm Steve and welcome to Woodworking Masterclass. This season what we're doing is making two boxes, a ply veneer box with solid timber edging and a solid timber box with a raised panel lid. Up until now we've been making the boxes and now we've got the carcasses ready, and as I said last episode, now we'll cut the lids off. Now I'll show you two ways of cutting the lids off. There are many ways you can go, but there are two I generally use. And in the first episode when we were building these boxes or designing them, I said you've got to consider what it is you're going to do to take the lid off. Because this one here, I'm not sure if you can see it because they are very small, and that's one reason we made them that small. These keys are spaced, so if I cut this off with the bandsaw, they're going to be nicely spaced with a very fine cut down the middle. If I was to cut this on the table saw, I'd have about a 3 to 4 mil kerf there, which is going to knock the balance of the keys out. So be mindful when you're designing the box how you're going to take the lid off. As I said, we'll do this one on the bandsaw. A couple of things to take into consideration. Firstly, make sure your bandsaw is tuned up. That is, the table parallel, the blade 90 degrees to the table, and the blade is sharp and has the right tension. If not, you can get a bit of wander. And if your bandsaw tracks, which is it goes offline sometimes, you've got to compensate with your fence so you get a straight cut. Because when you're actually cutting on the bandsaw, what you're doing is cutting three sides at once at a couple of points. When you're cutting the end, you're also cutting the front and the back. Now if your table's a little bit out or your saw blade's a bit wonky, you're going to actually not get a nice parallel cut, which isn't disastrous, but hey, why make more work for yourself? It just means you've got to plane a little bit more and sand a little bit more. My bandsaw I've actually tuned up, got a sharp blade on it and got a fence. If you don't have a fence, you might have to make one up out of a piece of timber with some clamps. But I've set it to the depth. I want to cut the lid off. But before I cut the lid off, there's something it's always a good practice to do, and that is use masking tape. Now the reason I do this is because it holds all the fibres together. You should see Bob, he's walking around looking bored. It holds all the fibres together on the exit side of the blade cut so you don't get tear out. More prone to veneers, but in solid timber it also has the same effect. Now I've worked out what depth I want the lid off. Bearing in mind with a raised panel, what you think is the top of your lid isn't. This top doesn't finish until here. So if I was to cut the lid off about there, we wouldn't have much meat in there to line or to finish the box off. So just bear that in mind. I've set the right height or the right width, and let's see how we go. Bit of light on the subject, but on the dusty. Oh. Knock my head. It's always a good thing to do. Make sure you got a push stick. And feed it through slowly. Don't rush it. Turn it off, turn that so I don't knock my noggin. And there you have it, the box lid is off. And just take the masking tape off. You'll notice that this is a little bit rough where the cut is, and the reason for that is because the saw leaves its mark. I'll show you how to get rid of that shortly. But before I show you how to do that, I'll show you how to take a top off on the table saw. Now this lid actually finishes where that solid edging is. So I can have a slightly shallower lid cut, but I'm still going to have enough depth to line the inside. Again, masking tape. And some of you might be wondering why I haven't measured. It's because I've made a few hundred of these and I know where I'm going. But it's always a good idea to use a marking gauge if you're not sure. All right, so I'll just go over to the table saw and I'll cut this off. As you can see, I've just drawn a pencil mark where I want the lid to come off. First thing to do, get a bit of extra scrap from the box you're making and set your blade height so it's just about the veneer's width from the top, because we don't actually want this to cut all the way through. We want a very small membrane to remain. Now I move the fence up, and you'll notice I've got a writhing knife. That's always good to have, because it keeps the box, when it's running in the track, straight, so you won't move on the blade, which can be very dangerous. You wouldn't use a splitter in this case because you wouldn't be able to do any trenching work. Now set that up to the pencil mark. Lock the fence. There we go. And then just slowly run your box up all the way so it comes off the riding knife. Just for a little test, get a knife to see if you can poke through. If you can, that's the thickness you're looking for. Don't rush it, just take your time. Turn the saw off, and there we go. We'll just go over to the bench and we'll take the lid right off. Meet you over there. Okay, as you can see, the lid hasn't totally been removed. So what I'm going to do is cut the rest with the knife. If you remember when we set the saw up, we came in within a whisker of coming through the box. So we've got a paper thin little membrane just holding that lid together. To cut it off, it's just a question of a nice sharp knife and some gentle strokes. You can hear that cutting through. A little bit stubborn there. There you go. So there's two ways to cut the box off, the lid off. I personally prefer the table saw because I'm only cutting one surface off at a time, and therefore my margin of error is greatly reduced. I'll just show you how to flatten these edges, because you can see I've got little ridges here. Just take the rest of this masking tape off. Okay. Now if you're near a kitchen shop or a cabinet maker's shop, just go down and ask them for a little bit of benchtop material. That's what I use. It's just, what's that? 35mm, 40mm chipboard. And whilst you're there, ask them if they've got a sheet of sanding paper that or abrasive paper that they've had in their drum sanders or their wide belt sanders. 9 times out of 10 they'll give it to you. This is a 60 grit, which is a little bit too hard for the solid timber one, but it's ideal for the plywood. So with the solid timber, I've got another board with 180 grit. But I'll show you how this works. Now, place it on there, and in circular motions with downward pressure, whatever you do, you have to do equally on all sides. So I'll do this 3 ways, and 3 ways the other way. Turn it 90 degrees, 3 ways, 3 ways, 90 degrees again, 90 degrees, and all things being equal, that'll be nice and flat now. Now you can do that to the bottom as well. Word of warning, you might want to have ear protection, because while the top is quite easy to do, the bottom will sing, and there's a horrible noise up, so I'm not going to do that. I'll finish that off in the break. You will notice with this plywood one, we've now got unsightly ply. We've got lovely veneer here, plywood on the inside. So after the break, what I'll do is show you how to cover this up and meld it all together so it looks nice and blended. All right, see you soon. G'day, welcome back. Just before the break, we took the lid off of this box and the solid timber box, and I showed you how to flatten it. Now, one more thing that is always handy to do, when you take your box lid off, like that, get a punch or a pencil or something or other, and just mark on the inside of the box so you'll know that this and this go together, because sometimes you put them on the wrong way around and you have problems closing. All right, I said I'd show you how to cover up this unsightly plywood, and this is how we do it. Another little shop jig that I've made, put that back, is a cutting board. Very easy. In fact, when you're in the cabinet shop asking for the sanding board, see if you can get a little bit of MDF as well. You put a fence on it, go to the cheapie shop, get one of these cutting mats, cut it to size, and there's a veneer cutting board. How it works, what I want is veneer strips a little bit wider than the box itself. So I've made these little wood widgets a little bit wider, and I put those either side, grab a ruler, there we go, and some veneer, which is over here. Now you remember in a previous episode we talked about marking which is up and which is down. So that's my downside. So we just mark that, so I know which part gets glued down. Then it's just simply a question of putting your glasses on, if you need them. Place that there. I think we've got an overhead working, so you should be able to see. Then get a nice sharp knife. Keep it nice and sharp. I just touch mine up every now and again with a bit of wet and dry just to give it a keen edge. And then stroke it along the blade, the ruler. Don't forget, don't try and cut it in one go because you'll rip the veneer. Sometimes it takes 3 strokes, sometimes it takes 30 strokes. And then you've got a nice strip like that. Now, to do a box, obviously you need 8 strips, but I won't bore you with doing 8 strips. The other thing is, I think I've mentioned it before, on your rulers, if you get a bit of 240 wet and dry, double-sided tape on the back, if you don't have it and you're working with veneer, your ruler will slip everywhere. If you've got that on, the ruler won't slip. Okay, just another little hint. So I've actually got 8 of these cut out over here, and I'll show you how to set those up. So we'll put this to one side. The first thing I do is get a 45 or a combination square. Again, sharp knife and a straight edge. My bench hasn't got a straight edge, but this mat has got a straight edge. Because I'm left-handed, I always cut the left-hand side first with the pencil facing upwards. And now if you just cut a mitre, I won't do all 8, I'll just do 4. Get it up there nice and tight. Whoops. So if you've got a sharp knife, it doesn't take too long. And the last one. All right, bring your box over. Now that mark I put in the box is just a routine of mine. I always have that mark furthest away from me, and I lay the strips down in a clockwise direction. If you're only doing one box, it doesn't matter, but if you do a lot, it's nice to have a process. So now you lay that upside up, pencil mark down, give it a little mark in the corner, come back to your table. The reason you have it wider than what you actually need is because, for whatever reason, if it doesn't line up or you're a little bit out, you've got the luxury of sliding this in for the mitres to meet or pulling it out a bit for the mitres to meet. So we've just got that one, do an edge one. Lining up in the corner there, and then marking on the corner. You don't have to be super accurate, fairly accurate will do, because as I said, you do have that luxury of manipulating these strips a little bit. Now I could show you the shortcut, but I think if I can show you the whole process, it might be easy for you to understand. You know, people think, oh, it's easy making a box. Yeah, there's nothing to it. But I hope you can see now, there's a lot more to making a box than meets the eye. And the last one is this one. In fact, I reckon I should charge the camera crew because they're learning all this stuff and they might start their own woodworking shops. A couple of them grinned. Ah, they're a good mob. Okay, now we've got all those cut out and we can start gluing up. What I do, again, trusty wax paper. Lay that out there. Lay your strips in order. And before you start, get a solid bit of board. Again, any scrap from a cabinet maker's shop. Any MDF or any chipboard you can get with this melamine or Laminex on the back, just grab it because it has so many uses around the shed. Now I place that on there before I do the gluing up. There we go. And it's a little bit involved, but what you'll need is a veneer hammer. If you haven't got a veneer hammer, no need to panic. Just a cork block with a bit of plywood on it. I've actually got Laminex on the back of that because then the glue doesn't stick to it and it slides around a lot better. We'll need some glue. Those of you that know me know I use this, but any other glue will do. No matter what it is you're familiar with, it'll all work. Make sure you've got the glue ready, you've got your strips ready, your box ready, and after the break I'll show you how to glue it all together, and then we're one step further to finishing the box. So see you after the break. Hi, welcome back. I'm laughing because Bob's growling because I've got the glue up here and he can't eat it. Okay, what we're going to do now is put the strips over these ply edges. What we do, first of all, get your glue and just paint all the way around the box. Now you can use contact cement for this. I've used in the past, but I find over time it can lift a little bit, so I've discontinued using it. It's a good product, but I prefer proper wood glue, whether that's a PVA or this stuff, it doesn't matter. And then we bunch all these together. And just give that a good slap of glue. And I've said previously, I'm of the school that believes you can never use too much glue. I would prefer to use too much and clean up than not enough and have a job fail on me. Okay, I'll just put that back over here. Right, now, box on a board, all glued up. These are laid out sequentially. Put my glasses on so I can see what I'm doing. And what you want to do is have a little bit of overhang on the inside and the outside of the box. So I said, if you've got a veneer hammer, and by the way, a lot of people use a veneer hammer like that, whereas the correct way is like that with that acting as a counterweight. And all this does, it squeezes the air out of the glue and then lets atmospheric pressure act as a clamp on the veneer. If you don't have a veneer hammer, as I said, cork block with a bit of ply works just as well. Next bit on. Feed it up to the corner. Next one. You've got to be pretty quick with this. Just hold it down. And the last one. This one is the one, if you're going to have a problem, it's going to be with the last one. But if it's oversized, Bob's eating the bits that I've dropped on the floor. Okay, now when you come to the corners, just make sure they're nice and tight. So rub them in nice and hard. And there you have it. Get rid of that one. New piece. Wax part down. Now this is the reason I have it on a board. Put another board on top with a weight. Oh! Now what that does, it allows me to move the box without moving the top veneers. So I'll just put this over here out of the way. Then of course you do the top. Fortunately, I knew you were going to be here today, so I cooked one earlier. So this is one I've just taken out of the clamps. As you can see, the wax paper comes off quite easily. And we have nice solid edges. Now to clean them up, again, sharp knife, get rid of that, don't need it. Sharp knife, bit of scrap timber, doesn't matter what it is, all I want is something to raise the edge of this box, so that'll give me a defined cutting edge down here. And then again, gently, don't rush it, gently cut around the edges. Don't try and cut around that corner, just leave that the way it is. And if you haven't got all of it done, there's the little bits that your knife's missed, that's fine. I'll show you how to get rid of those. I know it's like watching paint dry, but you can't rush it. If you do, it's going to take you twice as long because you're going to have to do it again. Okay, now these little bits here right on the corner, you can either get them with a knife just by pushing down, don't try and stroke them because you can break them off, or just a nice sharp chisel, whether it's a paring chisel or just a long fine chisel, but it has to be sharp. Okay, now that's nearly all flush with the sides. What we've got to do now is feather it in, and by that I mean get a bit of so I might use 180 on this, and I'm using the hard part of the cork block, the one with the ply on it, because if I'm using the soft part it will tend to follow the undulations of the timber and not give me a nice crisp join. So do this, and then you just gently rub it up and down and rolling it at the same time, which gives you a nice clean edge. Then to do the inside, same thing, 100 grit for the inside, and you do it in a shearing motion, gradually rolling over and rolling in. And again, don't rush this, because if you do, you'll make a mistake. I suppose that's how we learn, isn't it, making mistakes? Then when you've got it all nicely smooth, grab a bit of 220 or 240 and just gently round it all over until finally you'll end up, not that one, until finally you'll end up with the box like that. It's nice and sealed and feathered in, and it looks a lot better than just the plywood. Okay, well that's it for the week. Been a big episode this episode. Next week we'll talk about lining the boxes and making some stands for them. So it's Steve once more pulling the shed door down for another week and saying thanks for being with me, and remember to keep it sharp, but more importantly keep it safe. See ya.